So I want to explore guilt at making boundaries. We all know about creating boundaries. It's a good thing to do, especially if you're in business, very professional, got to have your boundaries. We all know about it in relationships, boundaries, but we're humans and we get attacked by whirlwinds of emotion when we are trying to set some kind of boundary. Well, at least I do, and I know I'm not alone. We feel guilty, we feel selfish, we feel pathetic. We should be able to cope with this situation. We shouldn't need to withdraw or create some kind of boundary. What is going on? Good topic, eh? Let's unwrap it, because looking at the fibs that hold us back, which is one of the things we do in this podcast, it seems quite clear that we've got fear in the shape of guilt, but fear of what? We've got illusion. This is the fibs. We've got illusion in the shape of people will think we're this. People will think we're an evil, selfish, horrible person if we do this. We've got baggage, more than likely. Not everyone has, but many people have got some form of baggage, which makes saying no into a much more emotional situation than it needs to be. And in fact, on that topic, the baggage topic, I've actually come across a new concept called fawning. And it's a bit of a trauma response. So I'm not going to go too deep into it because I'm not a psychologist or a psychotherapist, but I will give you a good link to find out more about it. Imagine there's an actual fourth F in the survivals of fight, flight, freeze, and it's called fawn. Intrigued? Let's delve into this more, and hopefully if you listen through to this short episode, you'll get something from the tips, the reframes that I offer at the end. Here we go. So you're listening to Self-Belief Unsquashed. This is your host, Trisha Lewis. And what we're really planning on doing here is just squashing your self-doubt and unsquashing your self-belief. We're going to explore this situation where you dread having a conversation, you absolutely want to do anything to avoid any possibility of any conflict, even although it hasn't actually even happened yet. And you are wanting to withdraw from either an individual, a group of individuals, maybe commitment, some kind of activity that you've been doing regularly, and you know it's not good for you, it's not your thing, and it's making you feel ugh. You have in your head that you're going to be terribly grown up and set this boundary, withdraw, and yet you somehow either are going to do it but be weighed down by this burden of guilt and I'm not a proper human being and I should have been able to handle that better, I'm weak, I'm selfish, whatever it is. Or you don't even do it and you end up saying yes, and you end up continuing to do the thing that isn't doing you any good until probably you get to some kind of real crisis moment, which isn't really ideal, is it? Not for your health, not for your mental or physical health. So we don't need to get to that point. But how do we avoid it? How do we navigate through this inner whirlwind of fight, basically, that you've set up in your head? And it won't just be you, by the way. And I'm speaking from personal experience, as always. Let's explore this. And although it's a bit early to throw a quote in, I'm going to do it now, just in case you don't listen to the whole episode, which would be ridiculous, but this is such a good quote. It's actually from a book called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Stop pleasing, start living is the tagline. Now listen to this. I think this sets this episode up very well. Every time you're given a choice between disappointing someone else and disappointing yourself, your duty is to disappoint that someone else. Yes, I'm going to repeat it. Every time you're given a choice between disappointing someone else and disappointing yourself, your duty is to disappoint that someone else. Doesn't feel right, does it? That brings us to this terrible conflict of, am I being selfish? In the same way that when I talk about your fear of being a show-off simply by putting your hand up, contributing to something, getting up on a stage somewhere, I say you're not being a show-off unless you're showing off. I'm going to say the same thing about selfishness. You're not being selfish unless you're being selfish. So you know that we all have to look after number one. It's the whole put your oxygen mask on first thing, which makes sense. And so, yeah, if your choice is burning yourself out into a stressed up ball of uselessness that is of no use to anybody that you do care for, or anything to do with growing your business or your own personal development, just existing in this world, if you are going to allow yourself to be frazzled and frizzled up because you daren't say something for the fear that it might look like you're being selfish, yeah, that doesn't really work, does it, as a life course to take? So you're not being selfish, unless, of course, you're doing it selfishly. And I'm putting on that voice to just exaggerate, you know, what selfish people are like. No, you're not that person. You are simply trying to look after yourself. You are protecting yourself. And that brings us to the next question. The fact that you need to protect yourself, does that make you weak? So we've got through the turmoil of, oh God, people are going to think I'm selfish. This is selfish, isn't it? This is selfish. I shouldn't be so selfish. And now we're into the, oh God, I ought to be able to cope with this. I shouldn't need to set this boundary. I shouldn't need to withdraw. This is pathetic. I'm pathetic. I need to toughen up. So we're now in that little bucket of a vicious cycle of squashing, basically, because you're not really taking yourself into consideration properly, are you, with these inner turmoils? I don't think so. So if you can recognize the fact that actually setting this boundary, not continuing to have these conversations with that person that is making you feel ill, not continuing to go to, say, that networking event because you feel you should, but actually it is so badly suited to who you are and the tribe you want to be part of, that again, it's making you feel almost ill every time you go. If you feel that withdrawing from that, setting a boundary, is either selfish in a bad way or weak, then of course you're going to just keep on doing it. And like I say, you'll probably do it until a crisis erupts. Either you lose your temper because you kind of keep suppressing who you are, and it suddenly bolts out of you in a moment which you'll regret, or you become physically down, you know, depressed almost, or certainly having physical symptoms of stress or burnout because you keep saying yes to everything when you want to say no. And that is what we're trying to avoid. You've got to somehow reframe this thing in your head that is saying, I'm selfish, I'm weak. I'm selfish, I'm weak, into I'm wise. I recognize that this isn't good for me, and I'm taking action. And not only that, but I am making an assumption that people are going to think certain things about me, when actually they're probably not even thinking that much about me at all. And if I have let them down by saying no, that is actually their problem, not mine, as long as I haven't done it in a careless, thoughtless, selfish manner, because it doesn't need to be. Just by saying no isn't the same as ruining that person's life. There are many, many quotes on the fact that we need to, mind our own soul, if you like, and not think that we are responsible for everybody else's happiness and well-being and success. No. Okay, right. So we've got a few reframes to do there. Of course, you will have almost heard the word people-pleasing throughout this episode so far, although I haven't, I think, directly said it. But that is a well-known concept, and you could well be one of those people that is inclined to do a bit too much yes when it should be no, or feel that you've got to be constantly lovely and agreeable, otherwise people are going to think you're not nice. And all of this is probably something that has come from many, many years of programming in some ways. But I did mention this term fawn, the fawning, as a trauma response. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go too deeply into this, but I'm going to put a link to a really good explanation of this in Psychology Today, because it's another way of looking at people pleasing, but it's potentially a little bit deeper because it's a trauma response. So anybody who has grown up with any form of toxic relationships, narcissistic parents, or got themselves into a narcissistic marriage, or relations that are of that nature, then you could well recognize this. It was a phrase or a term, if you like, coined by a psychotherapist called Peter Walker. All that will be in the article that I'll link. And it is, he said, the fourth survival instinct. We either fight, fly, freeze, or fawn. And when we fawn, he describes this as being a response to the threat, whatever that is. And in this case, it might just simply be the threat of that person not liking us because we might just be about to withdraw from them or say no or something. A response to the threat by becoming more appealing to the threat. So we start actually being super nice to that person and agreeing a lot and doing things that take us really out of our way in order to please that person. It's obviously not a good way to exist, but it's understandable if you have always felt that there was a real danger in disagreeing, in saying no, in not being perfect. This is a quote by Gabor Mate. Again, I'll link any references. And this really is about the fact that we will make ourselves ill if we don't recognize that we're doing this. When we have been prevented from learning how to say no, our bodies may end up saying it for us. So if we ignore the signs of this fawning response, we ignore that churning stomach, dread, sense of resistance, we could pay for it by getting burnt out and having not good physical symptoms. It's a sort of form of people pleasing, but it's a bit more than that. And you tend to find yourself smoothing things over, keeping the peace, being over accommodating, losing yourself, self-squashing. You forget who you are in all of this. So it sets up quite an odd response in you, which is partly to do with this guilt that you feel, because hang on a minute, I'm doing I'm doing the right thing now. I'm saying no. I'm setting a boundary. I'm choosing myself first. I'm looking after myself. I'm not waiting for it to get to a crisis and really messy. But weirdly, that almost feels like some form of betrayal. Your nervous system literally doesn't quite know what to do with this very wise move that you've just made, because that's not what you normally do. It feels dangerous. It feels like you've done something really bad. And that's when you feel this irrational but understandable sense of guilt. It's not because you're doing something wrong by setting this boundary. It's because you're doing something new. Scary. I keep mentioning weak because that is the weird thing, isn't it? It's almost like we just think we must be weak if we can't deal with this conflict, this awkwardness, this thing that isn't quite right for us, this discomfort. And it can be anywhere on the sort of spectrum, if you like. And obviously, if it's not huge, you feel even more like you're just being pathetic, a wimp. Oh, other people manage. It's just me, isn't it? I'm just such a coward. I just don't want anything to be, unpleasant or awkward, and can't cope with it, can't cope with it. I'm weak. Right. So we're going to flip the script. So if we tell ourselves that withdrawing is weakness, that we're cutting people off, that we're being cold, we're being selfish, all of those things, we just need to simply say, this is my decision. This is what's right for me. I am, if you like, minding my soul, which is rather crucial. There is a Stoic philosopher called, see if I can pronounce this correctly, Epictetus, who said this: keep your attention focused entirely on what is truly your own concern, and be clear that what belongs to others is their business and none of yours. He's even saying that. It sounds like, oh, that's really rude. That's really selfish. It's not. It's not. But boy, does it take some convincing. If something in you knows a situation will cost way more than it's worth in terms of your physical and mental well-being, you're not being rude by creating that boundary. You're being wise. You're not being rude. You're not being selfish. You're not being weak. You're being wise. Let's bring that wise word right up to the top. I mean, take an inanimate object like your phone. You try to avoid leaving it until it wears down, the battery is on like 1%, don't you? Because you know that you're going to need it at some point, and this could be the moment when you need it, and you're now literally going beep, 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 no battery. So you tend to keep it charged to a reasonable amount on a regular basis before it gets to that crisis point. So why wouldn't we do that to ourselves? Why wouldn't we look after ourselves, keep our energy charged, keep it protected, if you like, so that we are equipped for the times when we really need to go for it, whether that may be to do all those unselfish things like helping other people. Just to sum up with a few sort of little tips, really just thinking nudges. Name the feeling. You know when this is going on. I mean, it might have become a habit and you might need to work really hard at recognizing it, but you will say, I feel guilty, but that doesn't mean I've done something wrong. In other words, you know the feeling's there. You're going to name it. I feel guilty. Don't try and say, oh no, this is silly. This is silly. Feeling guilty is silly. That's not going to work. I feel guilty. I do feel this. Okay, that is my truth. This is my feeling. Okay. But hang on a minute. I know that doesn't mean I've done something wrong. Okay, so you've named it. It's out on the forensics table. And then try using the good old reframes. This is pretty much what I do in my book, The Mystery of the Squash Self. we have all these various cases that get unpicked, and the psychiatrist comes in with a few other bits of research, and then there's all these various tips at the end of each chapter, and lots of reframes, lots of pressing pause and doing the reframes. So for this, you want to try something like, I'm creating space for peace. I read something recently, somebody's post, I think on LinkedIn, saying how wonderful it was to spend an hour over coffee with no other sounds on, nothing in their headphones, no rushing people all around them, in quietness. And it sounds a bit sort of woo, but so many really clear thoughts came to this person in that space of time, and they felt re-energized, and they were going to go out and be of more use to the world. Okay, so yes, I'm creating space for peace, or I'm choosing myself early, not after I've burnt out. I'm choosing myself early, not waiting till I'm a complete and utter mess. Good. And visualize maybe future you thanking you for taking care of yourself like this and not allowing yourself to get tangled up in drama. And what boundary would protect me, would protect my peace, if I gave myself permission to draw it. Hope that's of some use. As always, stay curious and unsquashed. Until the next time, tell people about this little cute podcast called Self-Belief Unsquashed. And if you want to know more about the unsquashing thing and some resources, including some little quizzes to take on imposter syndrome and various things, then head over, as I say, to trishalewis.com. Links to my book, the TEDx talk, and resources.